Welcome to another edition of Small Cap Power Discussions. I'm your host, Jim Gordon. Joining me is one of my faves, Frank Holmes, Chief Executive and Chief Investment Officer at U.S. Global Investors, which specializes in natural resources and emerging markets investing. Frank, it is great to see you again, sir.
Good to be with you, especially the summer's over now.
Fall. It's amazing how time flies, Frank. I was thinking we usually talk a couple of times a year. It was last winter when we last spoke, and one of the things that we have been discussing specifically, I think since probably late 2020, is the airline industry. It has, you've kind of walked us through everything that they're going through. It has been 6 months since we talked, as I said, it's always changing. What are your thoughts as of right now? I've been on 5 international flights in the last 4 months, and I see a lot of lineups, but people are going to travel. They'll put up with it. They'll get angry. You take it from there.
No, it's absolutely, you're correct. It's packed. And the airlines, what they've done is cut back on a lot of your options to fly and give them pricing power because the demand is still very robust. What's really interesting to me is a new tourist business person is they're like Zoomers. They perfected Zooming, but they can do the coding anywhere. And so they want to go to Cancun. They're just going to check the Wi-Fi. And they're going to the islands of the Caribbean, and you think of JetBlue buying Spirit, and Spirit had the discount airlines with the biggest connectivity all through the Caribbean, and so they want to own the East Coast because you have all these people that would say, I'd rather go work in the Bahamas in the afternoon after I've done my coding and a walk on the beach. So it's really interesting to see how that's evolved, but business is picked up. Cathay Pacific is making money out of Asia. Asia, we saw it turned up, and then once again we had lockdowns in China, which impact tourism.
And Frank, I was looking at recent stats that your team provided. Is traveling up to like pre-COVID levels?
Yes, it is. And it's looking at TSA numbers, and TSA publishes this on a daily basis, how many people they clear, and so you can see that it was 1.4 million a day. It went down to 89,000 on April the 15th of 2020, and slowly started climbing back, and that's when jets really started to take off. And so I think, you know, they have some real labor issues out of Europe. You have poorly thought out climate change policies, where one of the busiest airports is Amsterdam, and we're going to cut back the number of flights allowed to land. So it creates a congestion. They still have employment issues of people coming back to work, which has caused some frustrations in the UK in particular. But I think it's just all the sort of teething problems of the economy coming back.
Frank, you mentioned Amsterdam. I was unfortunate to be in a lineup coming back to Canada last June, and about a 2.5-hour lineup. The feeling I was getting from talking to people online, because you got nothing else to do, was that people are trying to understand and be sympathetic and patient. But a lot of the questions, I don't know whether you can jump in on this, but there was a lot of discussions and people wondering, how are the airports caught off guard? Yeah, there's a labor thing, but could they not have been better prepared? Because I got a sense that they knew that day was coming where people were going to travel internationally or nationally. Where did they slip up?
Oh, it's the restrictions. It's all, take a look at Canada. I mean, it has some of the most draconian measures. And if you wanted to go from Ontario to Quebec, all of a sudden you couldn't drive. New Brunswick was even more severe. So what you saw was not synchronized well globally by countries, and the U.S. too did the same thing. Of people couldn't come in. You saw people flying to Toronto to basically quarantine, but in a nice hotel for 2 weeks before they could come in the U.S. So there was this synchronization by federal governments are really key here, and that has not been smooth.
Let's stay with travel and talk about fuel. One of the stats I was reading was just that the global airline industry wants to reduce carbon dioxide emissions. I talked to you about this before, about the plan to do this by 2015. I think they're talking about 2% or 2.5%. Is that a big deal in terms of the grand scheme of things?
Well, For I guess psychology it is, but I think the bigger part is to look for the innovation. A 25% tax on Canadians for anything with carbon, where does that money go? It didn't go to innovation. And I think the new biofuels that are coming out, I think they're going to be really key. So it will happen. Then we have to get newer airplanes. If you look at the fleet of Air Canada, they have too many old airplanes, and they're the ones that give off. They're just not fuel efficient. They're not carbon efficient, whereas the new Boeings and the Airbuses, they're much more efficient and effective in lowering the CO2.
And are the airlines, I don't want to generalize, but you said Air Canada, which is my country's main airline, are the airlines kind of hesitant at the moment to do that because of what they've just come out of?
I would think so. I think it's also just the capex and cash flow and how they have to manage it. And now we have big labor issues of control tower just shut down again. I think it was Italy earlier this year, and then it was Paris. And so you see that there's this pricing pressures coming in for the workers. And I think that's inflation is really caused probably the greatest frustration because the demand for higher salaries to compensate. I know for our business in Canada, we mainly gave everyone $1,000 a month increase in their base salary because a lot of the workers that we have for high blockchain, they have to drive. And so that was a big burden on them of that cost, of that additional cost. So we didn't have a strike, but you're seeing other businesses going on strike.
Frank, you touched on something, I just made me think of this about workers and driving and everything. For 2 years, there's been no driving for the most part. I was watching a story the other day on CBS this morning, and they were talking to different companies about their attitudes toward got to be in the office, partial office during the week. Do you see that everybody returning to the office full time, or do you think it'll become one of those, it's a company's decision? As they said, Yelp was looking at, I think they were one of the people cited in the story where they said, people can work at home. Other companies were going, no, that's over. You're in here 5 days a week.
Well, one of the things is compliance of following workers. Productivity drops unless they're going to be working 70 hours a week. That's what they find. It's much easier if people are congregating. And I think that when I would have seen for some of these investment conferences earlier this year in Miami, it was 30,000 people. For a crypto event was in Austin. They moved it from New York. And they had 7,000 people. So people do want to get together and share ideas on what's going on. And that's really important in the workplace. When Jets was exploding back in 2020, contrary to the overall market, as we've talked about before, it went from $11 to $28 and then started coming back because of rising energy prices. Well, what sort of drives all of that? And I think that a lot of it that people realize they want to travel, they want to actually be together. So if you want to go travel and I'm the boss, I'm going to say, well, why can't you come to work? You mean you're going to go to Cancun for the weekend, but you can't come into the office? So we know that the productivity, but during this whole run, in Texas was very fortunate. Wear a mask, keep your 6 feet. We had people coming to work every day to manage the incredible growth that we had in our ETFs.
Frank, one last question about the travel industry. I've been seeing more and more reports, and I know news outlets at times can do the scaremongering thing, but what is the general feeling in the airline industry about coming into the winter and, oh, well, we have another bout with whatever variant is it? Is the airlines prepared, overly prepared, cautious? What's your sense?
No, I think they're pretty well prepared for that. I don't think that's a big concern. The big concern will always come back that what you see is the more left in America, the more left of center a state is, the more severe the lockdowns.
Right.
You want to compare Florida versus New York State, New York City versus Miami. What were the differences? Both have a lot of retired folks, a lot of old age homes. It was the policies that were so key. And we were talking the other day to a leader in Dubai, and they said it was the best Olympics in the world because every country got to participate. What were their policies? Who's the gold medalists in allowing people and kids to go to school, etc.? We're still seeing this stuff in reading about it in Canada of wearing masks to class, and this was a big issue only months ago. And so I think this is the real big significant factor. Our government policies are a precursor to change. And we, by the way, we put that in all of our prospectuses, that we believe that. And so we monitor both monetary and fiscal policies. Well, what's interesting is that when you look at fiscal policies, it's tax and spend and regulations. It's a binary model. So rising regulations will slow down an industry or the economy. Streamlining regulations open up an economy. And the same thing with taxes. So with that, we've been tracking and looking at what various countries' policies. One of the big disruptors that really came out of the Ukrainian war, defending themselves against the aggression of Putin and Russia, was the policies that were climate change policies. They were not properly thought out. A lot of them were emotionally driven by politicians and bureaucrats with NGOs. Like, these NGOs have been funded. Now they find out that Putin and his KGB were funding them to get off of nuclear and get off to become more dependent on Russia. And then all of a sudden go to war and oil prices go up. Well, guess what? He didn't expect that what took place on the rebellion of that by the EU and America and Canada. So I think we have to really have deep thinking about climate change policies, and governments have to be more focused on the innovation to solve these problems.
Talking with Frank Holmes, Chief Executive and Chief Investment Officer with U.S. Global Investors, usfunds.com. Also an author and a blogger. And Frank, every time we've spoken, a discussion with you would not be complete without a discussion on gold. Looking at some figures, again, your team, Holly and the team sent me about the latest report from the World Gold Council. Can you talk a bit about their latest reports and other thoughts in that arena?
Well, I guess the big Denver Gold Show just took place, where every major institution is there that plays in that arena, and CEOs and CFOs and money managers. So we had our team there, and I think 60% of the producers have free cash flow. So they're much more disciplined and how they manage their affairs. But overall, bullion. One of the things that, if you look at global macro factors, is that Russia was hoarding gold because they know that whenever you go to war, your paper's worth nothing. One of the things when we talk about Hitler, when Hitler invaded any country, he went for the central bank to see how much gold there was, because no one wanted to take Deutschmark. Japan invaded China to get the gold because no one would give them oil unless they gave them gold for it. So it's interesting to see these macro forces. So we're seeing supply leaking out into Switzerland, being remelted down for other coins. And the bigger buyer seems to be coming. Still, China is very strong in doing that. But for the fear person is the inverse relationship to the 10-year government bond. So the inverse relationship to the 10-year government bond drives the US dollar. And that has a big inverse relationship to gold. So as we can see, as the 10-year government bond has been rising dramatically in the US, the US dollar has gone through the roof, gold has fallen, but the US dollar is at a 30-year high. Do you know what that was 30 years ago? Gold was 300. So gold, is corrected on that relative basis. But I think, and I was just with JP Morgan investment people, and they were saying that they're looking at bonds to be a big play next year for rates to come down. When those rates come down because of the recession that's impacting, we're going to see gold just rip it up, because they're going to have to print more money on each cycle to be able to maintain a stronger economy.
Frank, we got a couple of minutes left. I wanted to go out on this one. Could you break down and give us some thoughts on the Ethereum merge?
Well, I have two types of thoughts on there. Well, first of all, it was is basically confiscation of assets going from one party to the next. So proof of work is the only way the SEC actually looks at a digital asset. Otherwise, proof of stake, they deem a security. So Ethereum moved from proof of work because they said all this energy is being consumed, but it's so much false information because it's so de minimis in the scheme of things on all the crypto mining companies putting in their data and showing it's much smaller than anyone had forecasted, like the World Economic Forum was just such BS. We're going to produce, use more energy than countries, etc. But shifting back is that the revenue, the yields, they're going to now go to the proof of stakers. And guess who the biggest staker is? JP Morgan, Coinbase. So it's really a shift of capital, but it runs a risk of becoming a proof of a security, and that's not gone away. So in fact, Ethereum was supposed to go higher than anything else, but it didn't. It's fallen more than Bitcoin. The Bitcoin phenomena really is two things, and one is what happened earlier this year. They call shadow banking. And shadow banking in America was basically funded by crypto. And the worst thing is that Voyager did, or Celsius, is they had a lot of crypto people putting money back in to get a yield in their banking sort of quasi structure. Then they started reaching out to take retail people that may be buying stocks or bonds, and for them to come in to get this yield. Well, they imploded. And so you saw a lot of wealth being lost, not only just in the crypto ecosystem, other investors. That became a cascading impact. And then really the big part is the uncertainty over regulations. What are the policies? So the day of the merge, September the 15th, actually was dominated by the US government, from statements from out of the Senate, statements by the SEC, and statements by the White House. And I must agree with the position of the SEC that proof of stake is really a proof of security, and that's what they want to regulate. But for us, it impacted us. We had the lowest PE ratio, so we were getting no value for incredibly profitable Ethereum mining. I mean, very, very profitable. So that's gone. Now we're mining other Bitcoin, etc. But we remain very resilient. We have a strong balance sheet, and I think that there's going to be lots of defaults in the next 6 months in the crypto space that we feel that we're in a position to acquire distressed assets. And the last bear market, we bought in Quebec, Lachute, and we bought in New Brunswick, GPU1. So we've been able to use these downdrafts to be able to increase our footprint.
Frank, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. I like doing this every 3 or 4 months because things change so dramatically in certain areas. I want to thank you for joining us. He's Frank Holmes, Chief Executive and Chief Investment Officer, U.S. Global Funds, or U.S. Global Investors, I should say. And also, don't forget to check out usfunds.com. Frank, I should ask you, are you still maintaining your Frank Talks?
Yes, I am. And I'm really thrilled that next week I'm going to be up at London, Ontario, for opening up the building, which are funded for leadership and entrepreneurialism and ethics at Huron University, which was the founding college of Western University. So I'm all excited going back to Canada, and I continue to give back to education in both US and Canada.
Good to hear, Frank. And at the time we are recording this interview, the Canadian government is talking about dropping the ArriveCAN application. So hopefully that will be in place by the time you arrive, or by the time the next time you're here. Frank, thank you, sir. It's always a pleasure. I'd love to talk to you again before the end of the year to get some more thoughts from you.
After the elections.
After the elections. I will hold you to that, sir. Late November, early December, we will do that. There he is, Frank Holmes. Thank you, Frank, and thank you for watching. Check out more videos, Small Cap Power. We're on YouTube. You can also check out our website. I'm Jim Gordon. Thanks for joining us on another Small Cap Power discussion.